So, is there any way that changing the format could possibly have aided in the process?
I think one thing that they could have done to change would be to shorten the actual amount of time that it takes to get the results from their investigation done. Because actually there are a lot of elderly people that submitted petitions that weren't getting their feedback before they actually passed away. There are 13 people that died while waiting for deliberations. So.
There's something to be said though about the fact that they had 11,000 cases. Like it's hard over such a small period of time to deliberate on the merit of a case and then have a back turn. So it's a lot to ask.
Right. But if they do get it done quicker, then they could go through even more cases. There were a lot of cases that didn't end in successful truth verification.
Yeah. But the truth verification also takes time with the whole researching it behind it and investigations and expecting to do their investigation.
Yes. And as for the research process, I was thinking that giving them the ability to subpoena as opposed to issuing warrants for people's arrests, like that seems a little bit over the line.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
It seems kind of silly for them to have to go and then ask people to give up information when there's a possibility that they could be looked down upon, or they feel that they would be looked at or read. I think they said.
Right. Yeah. So what do we think of like the overall format of reconciliation?
It was, I think, they were trying to, in their mission statement, they said that it was to facilitate the healing process, but I don't think they really did that because they never really took responsibility for anything. They kind of, most of the time, they just shoved off on the U.S., especially the U.S. Fire Department. Yeah. And then they never really did anything on the behalf of the U.S.
Their apologies really personal, personal. And like when they went to apologize to certain people, they would, they had an officer, a government official go to the houses, but then the government official wasn't a high ranking one, was just a local police officer, and that kind of makes it not as personal.
Yeah, but I mean, one thing that I can say is that because it happened so long ago, and because it was over such a long time period, I think it would be pretty difficult for them to like administer an apology. I mean, number one, a lot of like the victims are dead and they're so like far removed.
Yeah.
That it's kind of, you know what I mean? I think a lot of it.
It's a lot to ask the logistics of it.
Right. Yeah. I think that they were more focused on like unearthing the truth from the past. It was really like history based.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said about that because the way that they addressed it is that there wasn't much to be known about the massacres at the time. And all of the information that they unearthed was actually pretty healing. But in a way, they kind of shoved it under the rug. You don't see any of that in their history books or any of that. So I think there's something to be said about how much responsibility.
They were also focused on prevention too. It wasn't solely on and acknowledging the truth. They wanted to also like move forward, have social reconstruction and things like that. Facilitate dialogue.
And I think that is really important when it was so long ago. I mean, just because, like, when I was doing research for the introduction, just like about the basic history, there were so many civil rights abuses, like so many people that were died that weren't accounted for. Just, I mean, it was an atrocious number. I mean, it was like 800,000 plus. I mean, it's just like how like apologetic can they really get? Like how many people can they go
Words
straight
can
to
only
and
do
say
so much.
exactly?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just.
I think there's something to be said that you could change the format of the commission to something more of a reconciliation. Saw that.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be not with that, but I don't think they did it very well.
I don't know. They tend to skip that.
Yeah. And they moved forward.
Well, I was just gonna say like, what do we think? Like, they address a lot of the people by number. Name.
I think they really tried to identify as many names as they could, but there were just certain cases to represent or something.
Right.
Feasible to figure out who people were.
There's definitely some undertones of like disattachment.
Yeah, with the
Yeah.
using of numbers versus
that, and then like the government officials were like,
that would
how
give the
does that
apology.
make you feel?
Exactly.
That was a good way for them to distance it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna get an apology, you don't want it from like a local police officer. You want it more from like the direct, like,
Yeah,
you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
the overseer, somebody who's more directly responsible.
And when,
Yeah.
and when you're receiving an apology, you don't want to be like, oh, case 253, I'm sorry for what happened.
Yeah.
You want
Exactly.
a name.
Do you think an apology like really does justice? Like, how much do you really need to get justice in something like this?
Right. But I mean, at this point, it's kind of like, what can they do because
Yeah,
it happened so
it's
long
simple.
ago? I mean, they can't take it back. But that's why I really liked how you made the point. Like, we should like how they focus on like, the reconstruction and kind of like preventing it for the future. I think that that's way better than any I'm sorry.
So maybe that's
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
we did it a little bit, focusing on that more. Than
Yeah.
we did with
That's
that.
what I would.
And the biggest thing that I had a problem with though was that they wanted to facilitate the healing process. And there's a lot that they could have done to help the victims. Like in the U.S. fire bombings, they just said you should seek reparations from the U.S. Like most of these people are probably farming as long as they're supposed to.
Exactly.
How do they even have the
Yeah.
How would that-
knowledge
Yeah,
of
no,
what's
there's
going
no
on?
the legal process.
And there's so many groups.
And I mean, not to say that the U.S. wasn't involved because they
Yeah.
obviously were, but I mean, a lot of things I was reading, it was pretty like joint. Like it was like
Yeah.
the President Re, and it was also the United States like fueling it more. I mean, not to say that they weren't involved, but for them to not want to take responsibility in that way and kind of like push it on like another country, I think that's
There's a lot of deflection on their part.
absolutely. And I think that they can do that more with like Japan because Japan actually came and colonized them and had complete rule over them, but the United States more was
That was the Korean War.
exactly like
You can't really like bring the U.S. and not acknowledge responsibility for
Exactly,
actions. And there's a lot of things that. That's like the one thing about this that I would change is that they should take a lot more responsibility on their own. I mean, it's so long ago that I think people would maybe understand a little bit, maybe undermine the authority of the government. So I think they get better on it by when they took the responsibility.
How much do you think it would undermine the authority of the government? That is kind of like a big issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of discuss.
Yeah. In a way, there's a lot to be said. I think it's a lot of very complicated.
I mean, I think it really would. I think it really would undermine the authority of the government.
Yeah.
To admit all these things.
Yeah.
You never want to appear weak.
Yeah. You don't want to appear weak, and you don't want to appear oppressive, because the way that they suppressed all of the knowledge of this, all these massacres, that there was a definite government cover up on this.
right, and that's like where the real like problem lied. And I mean, one thing that I was researching, the government like when they were killing all of these civilians who they thought were like supporting communists, right? And there was no real evidence behind it. They basically said that it was them cleansing, right? Like they gave an explanation so that it seemed just what they were doing.
And there's still a lot of rhetoric around now when they talk about these things, that it wasn't them killing a bunch of people, it was them quelling the rebellion of communists.
Exactly.
And, there's
Which is why the United States supported it, right?
Yeah.
It's why we were
Yeah.
giving them aid.
Yeah.
It's because we saw it our duty to like suppress this like communist uprising. When really it was like how much threat really was there.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Right.
You can kind of relate that back to today a little bit. I mean, you shouldn't get too far off topic, but that's kind of what's happening in the Middle East and trying to suppress different people's views that maybe weren't a threat to us before, and now that
Exactly.
Yeah. And our involvement may have exacerbated things,
Right.
in a way. But there's also involvement in North Korea that we have to talk about. There's that fisherman that was
Yeah.
never really apologized. And then every time they would try to come forward, they would arrest or kill any of like his family members and all of that. They're being proactive, but they were also being oppressive. So, but the general overtone of this is that